Well, I remembered the thing that I couldn't remember at the end of the previous um, session. It was the quotation from Teilhard, top of 164, and the last sentence there of that quotation that Falk offers. All this happened, this explosion in consciousness, self-consciousness, self-awareness, etc. All this happened for the first time. Every time people say things like that, and I got on out for this, we don't know it was the first time. I seriously doubt it was happening for the first time. We can say for the first time on this planet. I actually know there are people that would dispute that, but I think most of the natural sciences would say, yeah, for the first time on this planet. But again, let us be humble enough to recognize that this is one planet in a dinky solar system in a vast galaxy that is one of billions, if not possibly even an infinite number of galaxies. Why in the world would we be so self-absorbed, so sure of just how centrally important we are, that we would have intelligent, like men, theologians, intelligent, not men necessarily, but I've only heard men say it. There might be a reason for that. Wow. We're so unique in the whole cosmos. Here's where the universe has become self-aware. It's gained this self-awareness in the human creature. Gee whiz. Who knows what else is going on out there? I'm moving right into chapter 6. The story of the creation of our species is one long story thoroughly grounded in the loving providence of God. I like that sentence. It is a story that began more than 4 billion years ago and was begun with us in mind. I'm not nearly so convinced of that statement, and my friend Daryl Falk knows it. I don't know how much evidence that we have that we were in mind, but I just wanted to we can maybe talk about that in class if you'd like. On the same, down in the same paragraph, the whole cosmos is to be God's dwelling place. We've talked about that with Genesis 1. The temples of the neighboring nations always contain physical images of their gods. We talked about that. What about the image of God in the real sacred space, the cosmos? Well, again, the whole cosmos. Do we assume that Genesis 1 is addressing the entirety of the whole cosmos? Not if we don't take it as a scientific manual, we won't. Remember that in Genesis 1, what's often translated earth, remember back to Karen Winslow, ha'eretz, land. It's not about a planet, let alone a planet in a solar system. They didn't have that idea. Let alone a cosmos, a vast cosmos of galaxies. So when we say that God intended that humankind would be God's physical representatives for the cosmos, that's just saying too much. Let's keep it humble. Genesis 1 teaches us about Adam as male and female in this land, on this land that we now know to be a planet, Earth, but we cannot make presumptions about worlds beyond us. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to stay put. I thoroughly applaud the adventure of space exploration, although we must take very seriously the costs involved in such undertakings to the detriment of the poor on our own planet. So my applause is muted. And in any case, in some one way, of course, wherever human beings end up going, even if we just stay here, But if we go to Mars, let's say, eventually, it's okay to say, yeah, we would be, presumably, we would be God's representative there. It's not impossible that in some distant past, Mars had self-aware creatures, purely speculation. But if they were self-aware and self-conscious, they are also religious in some way, and ask questions of origin, purpose, meaning, why am I here, what are we, where are we going, etc. And once those questions are asked, that denotes a searching mind, searching heart, if you will, and those questions are always, I'm going to say again, not initiated by the creature. We believe in grace, that those questions, those longings are initiated by the presence of God in whatever world we're talking about. So I'm going to move on through some nice stuff here. He really draws on a lot of theologians early on here in the origin of our species and providence. Let's see. I like this. Wow. The hidden life of trees material is really interesting. 172, 173. He's talking about moss on 172 at the top. Each moss species is specialized for a particular microenvironment. I mean, one way we can say the same thing about human beings, right? We can. Our microenvironment is planet Earth, and it's not even the whole planet, of course. So I'm going to say again, why would we, I'm just making this point again, why would we assume that in the vastness of the cosmos, we're like the only game in town? It is the height, that's the height of pride, presumption, arrogance, in my humble opinion. All right, because it's a humble opinion, right? And it will make its home among the other species depending on the amount of light in one spot versus another, the water availability and desiccation dangers associated with the various nooks and crannies and presence or absence of other organisms. The only reason I read that is I love the phrase nooks and crannies, and you know I love spoonerisms. And the spoonerism for nooks and crannies is crooks and nannies. So what we've been saying about God and God's loving presence here is that God is fully and lovingly, actively present in every crook and nanny of the universe, and in every in every crook and nanny, in every nook and cranny of the universe, and every crook and nanny on earth. And if they have crooks and nannies in other worlds, them too. Yes, I know. Wild, crazy, wild man. I'm going to move along here. Again, a lot of citations from theologians in this section. And, wow, where I think things get really dicey. It starts on 176 with a headline or a heading, contingency. So what does theology tell us about how God brought creation into being? About this, theology is largely silent. But I do like that he draws on John Wesley here. You might notice in the footnotes that he's drawing on John Wesley as quoted by yours truly. Wesley, in the later part of his life, the last 10, 12 years, his sermons just got really cosmic. He really began to just imaginatively expand his thinking about God and the love of God and the presence of God. Now, oh yes, the beckoning call of Genesis 1. Anyway, Wesley once wrote, "There is no place empty of God." And what I mentioned in class time or two is that, in fact, if there were, in principle, a place empty of God, it would, in principle, not be a place. It would not exist. That creaturely existence depends intimately and thoroughly on divine presence. So Wesley once wrote, "There is no place empty of God, and every point, oh my goodness, every point of infinite space." Now, wow, he calls space infinite there. It is weird, though, because you go like, well, if space isn't infinite, then it must have an edge. And then we go, and what's beyond that edge? More space? No space? I know that space and time probably don't work very well here, but Wesley, there is no place empty of God, and every point of infinite space is full of God. I think I've been trying to say that in class a few times, Luke. Of course, just as Wesley said, it doesn't make it right, but you can't get more radical than this. Every point of infinite space doesn't have just a point of God. It's not like there's a little point, a little bit of God in every space. It is that every point of infinite space is itself filled with God. Holy smokes. Wesley also wrote that God acts, quote, by sustaining all things, without which everything would in an instant sink into its primitive nothing, by strongly and sweetly influencing all, and yet without destroying the liberty of his rational creatures. Then he quotes, well, most of what is the next one is also me quoting Wesley. But here's, I want to mention this, just unpack this a wee bit. God is described by Wesley as strongly and sweetly. Strongly and sweetly, interesting combination, right? Strong but sweet. Not overly strong and not just gooey sweet. There's a strength there. Strongly and sweetly influencing all. All what? All everything. Not just living things. Every point throughout the universe. God is strongly and sweetly influencing all. The word influence is great. It comes from French roots, and it means literally to flow into. And I love that image of God. I do. God as the loving, active presence that flows into every moment and point of infinite space, including the subatomic particles of your body, but also into your cells and molecules, into your physical body, blood and bones, into your brain, without destroying the liberty of his rational creatures. And here, of course, he means primarily human beings, although he could have angels in mind as well. God inflows but does not destroy. In fact, the argument would be, finally, that this inflowing presence of God, who is love, that's what's flowing. One place he calls it the eternal flame flowing forth. Wow. That's God. John Wesley was pretty cool. What was I going to say about that? Oh, that in fact it's this very dynamic presence of God that makes possible, by calling us forth, makes possible our agency, our capacity for some kind of choice and responsibility for those choices.